At a dentist appointment, my 10-year-old daughter looked frightened. Then her dentist handed me a secret note that my husband wasn't supposed to see. I read it and froze. I didn't panic. I took action. By the next night, my husband was the one panicking. We lived in Emerald Valley, a gated community outside Chicago where the lawns are trimmed like military haircuts, and everyone's smiles come with an invisible HOA invoice. If you forget to wave at your neighbor, someone will politely remind you. If you forget to keep your family looking flawless, people don't remind you. They just watch. I'm Catherine Reynolds, Kate, to everyone who's ever met me for more than 5 minutes. I'm a physician at a private clinic downtown. I've treated heart attacks, broken bones, panic attacks, and one man who insisted his energy was off because Mercury was doing whatever Mercury does. My husband is Mike. He's the kind of man who can make a spreadsheet feel judged. He works in finance. He believes in performance metrics the way some people believe in God, deeply, loudly, and with very little room for questioning. And our daughter is Ellie, technically Eleanor on paper, because Mike liked classic names. Ellie has my last name, Reynolds. Mike kept his Hayes. At the time, we called it a modern choice. In practice, it mostly meant we didn't have to argue about monograms. Ellie was bright, curious, and once, she laughed like she wasn't afraid of taking up space. Once. I used to tell myself we were lucky. I used to tell myself I had married a good man. Neighbors told me too. At block parties, while the dads compared grills like they were discussing geopolitical strategy, someone would lean in and say, "Kate, you hit the jackpot. Mike is so involved." Involved. That word sounds warm until you realize it can also mean embedded, like shrapnel. And I would smile, because in Emerald Valley, smiling is part of the lease. The truth is, Mike ran our home the way he ran his department. Goals, deadlines, deliverables. Ellie had a color-coded schedule taped inside a kitchen cabinet. You couldn't see it unless you reached for the cereal, because we weren't advertising it. We were just living it. Monday, math drills, piano, reading log. Tuesday, tutoring, writing practice, character building chores. Wednesday, test prep, screen time earned, early bedtime. Even weekends weren't weekends. Weekends were catch-up and extra push. Mike called it discipline. He said it like it was a gift. I called it structure. I said it like I was a responsible mother. Ellie called it nothing at all. Ellie just did what she was told. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I brushed it off because I was tired and it was easier. Ellie used to talk. She used to ramble about books and weird facts and how clouds looked like animals. She used to ask me questions while I cooked. "Mom, why do people yawn?" "Mom, do fish sleep?" Then one day she stopped asking. Not gradually, just stopped. She also stopped leaving things around the house. No socks on the floor, no half-finished crafts, no stuffed animals wandering into the living room. A 10-year-old without mess is not a well-raised child. It's a child who's scared of consequences. I didn't say that out loud. I thought, she's maturing. Because that was the story that hurt the least. A few weeks before the toothache, her teacher, Jessica Miller, called me after school. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said gently, "Ellie's quieter lately. She sits alone at recess. She's not mean. She's not disruptive. She's just withdrawn." "I'm sure it's just a busy season," I said, the way moms say things when they're trying to keep their world from wobbling. "We're prepping for a competition." "I understand," Jessica said. Then, after a pause, "She also seems terrified of making mistakes. She'll erase a word until there's a hole in the paper." I promised I'd talk to Ellie. I did mention it to Mike at dinner. We were eating grilled chicken and vegetables because Mike believed joy was stored in carbs and should be rationed. "Jessica called," I said. "She thinks Ellie's stressed." Mike didn't even look up from his plate. "Good," he said, like stress was a vitamin. "Good? If she cares, she'll excel," he said. "If she's relaxed, she'll coast. The world doesn't reward coasting." Ellie sat very still. She chewed like she was trying not to make noise. I tried again. "She's only 10. Mike finally looked up. His face was calm, his voice even, the kind of calm that makes you feel childish for having feelings. "And she's capable," he said. "We're not raising average." We. It sounded like teamwork. It sounded like love, and I nodded, because I was exhausted and because I wanted to believe him. Another week passed. Emma's mom texted me, "Sleep over this weekend? The girls miss each other." I smiled at my phone. Finally, something normal. "Absolutely," I texted back. Then I heard Mike behind me. "Who's that?" he asked casually, as if he didn't already know. He tracked our calendar like it was a stock portfolio. "Emma's mom," I said. "She wants Ellie to sleep over Saturday." Mike's eyebrows lifted, just slightly. Not anger, not even disapproval. Just decision. "She has practice tests Saturday," he said. "She can see Emma after the competition." It would have taken so little to push back. A simple, "She needs friends." A simple, "No." Instead, I heard myself type, "Sorry, busy weekend." Rain check? Ellie didn't even ask why. She just nodded when I told her, like she already knew how the world worked. That should have gutted me. It didn't. Not yet. Monday morning, Ellie came into the kitchen with her hand pressed to her cheek. "Does it hurt?" I asked. "A little," she said. Her "a little" was the kind kids learn when they don't want to be trouble. It was small and careful, like she was trying to shrink the pain down to something acceptable. I called Dentlux Dental, the clinic everyone in Emerald Valley recommended. In our neighborhood, recommendations were less about quality and more about who you were seen with. They had an opening at 11. I planned to take her alone. I'm a doctor. I can handle a dentist visit. I can handle a lot. Mike appeared in the doorway as I was grabbing my keys. "I'm coming," he said. "You have a meeting," I reminded him. "I'll move it," he said, like meetings were chess pieces. "I want to be there." It almost sounded sweet. Almost. Ellie's eyes flicked to him, and then away so fast it was like she'd touched a hot stove. "You want Dad to come?" I asked gently, because the look on her face wasn't relief. Ellie's head shook too quickly. "Yes, of course." Her voice was bright in that forced way kids do when they're trying to stay safe. Like cheerfulness is armor. In the car, Mike talked about staying ahead, about how missing schoolwork over a little tooth pain wasn't an option. "You can do half the math set tonight," he told Ellie, "but I want it perfect." Ellie stared out the window and whispered, "Okay." When we got to Dentlux, the waiting room was full of the usual kid-friendly nonsense. Cartoons without sound, a fish tank, a basket of toys that had clearly been disinfected into emotional emptiness. There was a little boy building a tower of blocks. He knocked it over on purpose and laughed. Ellie didn't react. She sat with her hands folded on her lap like she was waiting for a verdict. The receptionist called, "Eleanor Reynolds?" Ellie stood up so abruptly her chair squeaked. I put a hand on her shoulder. She felt tense, like a wire pulled too tight. The dentist was Dr. Brian Sullivan, mid-50s, kind eyes, the calm confidence of someone who's seen every kind of fear and doesn't mock any of it. "Hi, Ellie," he said. "Show me where it hurts." "Back," she whispered. "Okay, we'll go slow," he said. "Mom's right here. Dad, too." And then his eyes landed on Mike. It was subtle. So subtle I might have missed it if I weren't trained to read faces in exam rooms. Something in Dr. Sullivan's expression shifted. Not hostility, not fear, more like recognition, like he'd seen this dynamic before. Mike smiled his corporate smile. Polite, blank. Dr. Sullivan started the exam. Ellie's whole body went rigid under the bright light. She didn't flinch at the mirror. She didn't flinch at the probe. She flinched when Mike cleared his throat. That was the moment my stomach sank, quietly, like an elevator cable snapping. Dr. Sullivan took longer than expected. He glanced at Ellie's jaw, the inside of her cheeks, her gums. He pressed gently along her muscles. Mike finally spoke. "Is there an infection?" "No obvious cavity," Dr. Sullivan said, careful and controlled. "But I'm seeing signs of bruxism." Mike blinked. "Bruxism?" "Grinding," the doctor said. "Often stress-related. It can cause tooth pain, jaw pain, headaches." Mike let out a small laugh like the doctor had suggested essential oils. "Stress," Mike repeated. "She's 10. Dr. Sullivan didn't smile back. 10-year-olds get stressed, sometimes more than adults. Their bodies just don't have the language yet. Ellie's fingers clenched in her lap. Dr. Sullivan's voice stayed calm. "I'm also seeing repeated small injuries inside her mouth, biting, tension. This isn't a one-week thing." Mike's jaw tightened. "We have high standards. That's not stress. That's motivation." The doctor looked at him in a way that made the room feel colder. "Motivation isn't supposed to hurt," he said. After the exam, we headed to the front. Mike muttered, "We're not coming back here. The guy's got an attitude." Ellie walked between us like she was trying not to touch either wall. We were almost out when Dr. Sullivan came into the hallway. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, then saw Mike and hesitated. He forced a polite smile, as if this was a normal follow-up. "Call if you have any questions," he said loudly. Then he shook my hand and in the same motion slipped a folded card into my palm. His fingers tightened for a fraction of a second. A warning. In the car, Mike was ranting. "He acted like I'm the problem, like I'm abusing my kid because I expect excellence." Ellie didn't make a sound. At home, Mike said he had to run back to the office and left. And only then did I unfold the card. "I'm concerned about your daughter. Call me when you're alone. There are things we need to discuss. Dr. Sullivan." I stared at it like it was written in a language I couldn't read and yet understood perfectly. I dialed 911. My thumb hovered, and then my brain did what it does best when it wants to avoid pain. It made excuses. What am I going to say? My dentist gave me a note? My husband is strict? My kid is quiet? I hung up. Because illusions are comforting, until they become coffins. The rest of the day, I moved like a machine. At work, I smiled at patients, signed charts, nodded at colleagues. My hands did their job while my mind replayed Ellie's rigid shoulders under that dental light. A nurse on my team glanced at me. "Kate, you okay? You look pale." "I didn't sleep," I lied, because that's the kind of lie adults accept without questions. That evening, Mike greeted me with the bright, satisfied tone of a man who believes he's doing everything right. "Ellie's fine," he said. "I gave her ibuprofen. She finished her reading log. No complaints." Ellie said, "Hi, Mom," like she was reciting a line. I hugged her. Her body didn't soften into me. She stayed braced, like contact came with conditions. After dinner, Mike had Ellie at the table with worksheets. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't hitting. He wasn't even being mean in a way that would look bad in public. He was worse. He was calm. "Again," he said, pointing at a wrong answer. "You rushed. You didn't think." Ellie erased. Her eraser left gray smudges on the page and her fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Mike didn't react to the apology. He just watched her like she was an investment he didn't trust. I stood in the doorway and felt something shift in me. Not certainty, not courage, just nausea. The next morning, the second Mike left for work, I called Dent Lux. Dr. Sullivan answered like he'd been waiting for my number. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said. "Thank you. Can you come in today? Alone." 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small office instead of a dental chair. Dr. Sullivan didn't waste time. "I want to be clear," he said. "I'm not trying to destroy your family. I'm trying to protect a child." My throat tightened. "You think Mike is hurting her?" He chose his words like he was walking through a minefield. "I saw a child who froze when her father spoke," he said. "Not normal nervousness, not dentist fear. She was afraid of being observed, afraid of doing something wrong." I started to defend Mike, because apparently my mouth had muscle memory for denial. "He's strict," I said. "He wants the best for her. Strict is not the same as terrifying," Dr. Sullivan cut in, still calm. "I also saw repeated tissue damage inside her mouth, consistent with chronic anxiety and jaw clenching. And her weight, she's on the thin side in a way that can reflect stress or withholding." "Withholding?" My voice cracked. "Food is a common control tool," he said gently. "So is isolation. So is humiliation." I felt heat rise in my face. "He would never hit her." Dr. Sullivan nodded like he'd heard that exact sentence 1,000 times. "Physical violence isn't the only kind of harm," he said. "Fear can shape a child's brain just as powerfully." Then he leaned forward. "I am a mandated reporter," he said. "I had reasonable suspicion. I filed a report with Child Protective Services." The words landed like a gavel. I didn't call," I whispered. "Many parents don't," he said, not accusing, just factual. "That's why mandated reporting exists. I'm also giving you resources. You need a safety plan. If you think your home could become unsafe when your husband realizes what's happening, do not confront him alone." He slid a paper across the desk. CPS hotline information, a local child advocacy center, a crisis line, and a short list of child therapists. I stared at it, suddenly very aware that my medical degree had not prepared me for my own kitchen table. "You're telling me my daughter is being abused," I said, and the word tasted unreal. "I'm telling you, your daughter is afraid," he said quietly. "And fear like that doesn't come from nowhere." I left the clinic in a fog, the kind of fog where everything looks normal from the outside, cars, traffic lights, people buying coffee, and you're the only one walking around with your world split open. That afternoon, Mike texted, "Running late. Board call." And for the first time in years, I was grateful for his absence. I made Ellie dinner. Not the clean dinner Mike liked. Not the lean protein with steamed vegetables and the moral superiority on the side. I made pancakes. Real ones. Butter, syrup. The kind that makes the kitchen smell like a childhood you can actually remember. Ellie sat at the table and stared at the plate like it might be a test. "You can eat," I said softly. She picked up her fork, hesitated, then looked at me. "Is Dad okay with this?" My heart clenched so hard it felt like it had teeth. "Dad's not here," I said. "And you're not in trouble. Ever. Not with me." She blinked rapidly, like she was trying not to cry. We ate in near silence until I couldn't stand it. "Ellie," I said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and you won't get in trouble for the answer. I promise." Her shoulders lifted, tight. "Are you scared of Dad?" She froze. Then, automatically, "No!" Too quick. Too polished. I waited. Didn't push. Didn't argue. Just sat there like a safe place and hoped she'd risk stepping into it. Her lower lip trembled. "Ellie," I whispered. "Please. I can't help if I don't know." The tears came fast and silent. She said. "I'm scared." I reached across the table and held her hands. They were cold. "What does he do?" I asked, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Ellie swallowed hard. "When I get a B," she said, "he says I'm embarrassing him. He says, 'Do you want to be average? Is that what you want?' And if I cry, he says crying is for babies." My throat burned. "He makes me redo things," she continued, words spilling now, like once the door opened it couldn't close. "Over and over. And he times me. And if I'm too slow, he says I'm lazy." I squeezed her hands. "Ellie." "Sometimes he makes me sit in my room," she said. "Like, for hours. No books. No toys. Just sit and think about what I did wrong." My stomach twisted. "And sometimes," she whispered, eyes dropping, "I don't get dinner. He says if I don't earn it, I don't get it." I felt something inside me go numb. "Did he ever—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. Ellie shook her head. "He doesn't hit. He just looks at me, and I feel like I'm going to disappear." Then she said the line that broke what was left of my denial. "He told me it's our secret," she whispered. "He said if I tell you, you'll pick him anyway. Because he's right." She started sobbing then. Real sobs. The kind kids hold back until the pressure becomes unbearable. "I didn't want you to be mad," she cried. "I didn't want him to be mad. I just wanted to do it right." I pulled her into my arms, and she clung to me like she'd been drowning. "You never have to earn food," I said into her hair. "You never have to earn love. You never have to be perfect to be safe." She cried harder, like safety was a foreign language and she was trying to learn it all at once. I called Mom. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. When she picked up, I didn't dress it up. I didn't soften it. I didn't protect anyone's reputation. "Mom," I said, "we're leaving. Tonight." There was a pause. Then her voice changed. Steady. Sharp. Immediate. "Pack documents," she said. "Birth certificate, insurance cards, your essentials. I'm on my way." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't argue with help. I packed like I was in triage. Not everything, just what mattered. Ellie's school laptop, her favorite hoodie, her stuffed animal she claimed she didn't care about, my work ID, our important papers, a few changes of clothes. Ellie hovered in the hallway, watching me like she expected Mike to materialize out of a wall. "Is Dad going to be mad?" she whispered. "Yes," I said honestly. "But that's not your job to fix." We left before Mike got home. I wrote a note. Short, clear, no drama, because drama was what Mike fed on. I know. Ellie and I are safe. Do not contact her directly. My attorney will be in touch. America doesn't do family implosions with teary living room speeches. America does it with paperwork and restraining order templates. Mike's parents, Richard and Patricia Hayes, called the next morning. Of course they did. Patricia didn't ask if Ellie was okay. She asked what I thought I was doing. "You're overreacting," she snapped. "Mike is a dedicated father. He pushes because he cares." I stared at my phone and thought about how people can say cares and mean controls. "Patricia," I said, "Ellie was scared to eat pancakes." A beat of silence. Then Patricia scoffed. "That's ridiculous!" Richard came on the line with his quieter, sharper voice. "Kate," he said, "you understand what you're doing to Mike's reputation." There it was. The sacred object. Not the child. The reputation. "He did this," I said. "Not me." They hung up on me like I was the problem. Mike called, texted, left voicemails that swung wildly between charming and threatening. "Kate, you're misunderstanding everything. You're poisoning her against me. You're making a huge mistake. I love you both. Come home." Each message was delivered in his calm voice, as if calmness made it true. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. All I could do was sit beside Ellie at my parents' house and watch her sleep without flinching in her dreams. That alone felt like proof. 2 days later, CPS contacted me. A caseworker came with a clipboard and the steady tone of someone who has heard every version of, "But he's a good man." She asked practical questions. Any weapons in the home? Any history of physical harm? Does Ellie have a safe adult at school? Has Ellie ever been left without food? Does Mike monitor her communications? Ellie answered quietly. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She said it like she was reporting weather. "Yes. Sometimes. I wasn't allowed to tell." The caseworker nodded and wrote it down, and I hated how normal it looked on paper. Because on paper, my daughter's fear was just ink. Then came court, temporary orders, emergency custody, a hearing date that arrived faster than my brain could process. Mike showed up in a suit that probably cost more than my first car. He looked composed, concerned, devastated in a way that would photograph well. He told the judge he was a highly involved parent and that I was overwhelmed by my workload and confused strictness with abuse. He said he was open to family counseling, as if this was a miscommunication. The judge listened, expressionless, because judges don't get paid to be shocked. My attorney spoke. CPS had filed their report. The CPS report sat there in black and white, colder than anything Mike said. The judge granted me primary physical custody, temporary at first, until the investigation concluded, and ordered supervised visitation for Mike. Mike's face didn't crack, but his eyes did something I recognized from home. That look that said, "You will pay for humiliating me." I felt cold all the way down my arms, and I thought, this is why Dr. Sullivan told me not to confront him alone. We started therapy with Allison Grant the next week. Allison was calm, kind, and absolutely unshakable. She didn't get dazzled by Mike's involved dad routine. She didn't get thrown by my guilt. She didn't treat Ellie like a fragile doll either. She treated her like a child who deserved her own space in the world. "No contact outside the supervised schedule," Allison told me. "No phone calls alone. No surprise visits. Ellie needs predictability." The first supervised visit was in a neutral center that smelled like disinfectant and old crayons. There was a small room with a couch, a few toys, and a camera in the corner. Not subtle. Nothing about it was subtle. Mike walked in and smiled like this was a normal dad-daughter outing. "Hey, kiddo," he said, reaching for Ellie. Ellie stepped back. The supervisor, a woman with a calm voice and a clipboard, said gently, "Let Ellie choose physical contact." Mike's smile tightened for a fraction of a second. Then he nodded. "Of course," he said. Because of course he did. He tried to talk like nothing happened. "How's school? What are you reading? Have you been keeping up with math?" Ellie answered in one-word replies. Then Mike did what Mike always did. He drifted toward correction. "You should sit up straighter," he said casually. The supervisor cleared her throat. Mike blinked. "What?" "This is a visitation, not a coaching session," she said, still polite. Mike's jaw flexed. Ellie's eyes dropped to her shoes. I watched from the observation area, hands clenched, heart pounding, because even now, in a monitored room, his instinct was control. After the visit, Ellie climbed into my car and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the entire hour. "You did so good. I told her. She stared out the window. Did I do it right? I swallowed hard. There is no right. You just are. That concept took months for her to believe. We moved into a small apartment back in Chicago once the temporary orders stabilized. It wasn't Emerald Valley. There was no gate, no manicured lawn, no neighbors who smiled like surveillance cameras, and somehow it felt like the first place we'd actually lived. Ellie switched to a public school. She started slow. She apologized constantly. Sorry for asking. Sorry for laughing. Sorry for being hungry. One evening, she spilled juice on the kitchen floor. She froze. Her face went white. Her hands trembled. I saw her brace for the familiar, the sigh, the lecture, the punishment. I grabbed paper towels. It's okay, I said. She blinked. That's it? That's it. And then she burst into tears, not because of the juice, but because the world didn't collapse. That was the day I finally understood what fear does. It makes tiny accidents feel like life or death events. Mike's parents tried again, a few months later. Patricia showed up at my building unannounced. I just want to see my granddaughter, she said, eyes narrowed like I was withholding property. You can coordinate through the attorneys, I said. Patricia's mouth pinched. You've turned this into a war. No, I said. Mike did. I'm just refusing to surrender Ellie. She looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. People love calling boundaries war when they're used to crossing them freely. The divorce took months. Court dates, evaluations, parenting classes, therapy compliance. Mike attended everything. On time. In polished shoes. Because Mike never missed an obligation that could be used as evidence of his excellence. But excellence isn't the same as empathy. Little by little, Ellie changed. Not all at once. Not in a movie montage way. In small, almost invisible ways. She started leaving a book on the couch without panicking. She started laughing louder. She started asking for seconds at dinner without permission. She started saying, I don't know, without flinching. Allison called it reclaiming space. I called it breathing. 2 years after that dentist visit, on another supervised session, Mike finally said something different. Not a defense, not a justification, not a complaint about how hard he tried. He sat across from Ellie, hands open on his knees, like he was trying to show he wasn't holding a weapon. Ellie, he said quietly, I was wrong. Ellie stared at him, cautious. I thought pressure would make you strong, he said. It didn't. It made you scared. I'm sorry. His voice shook just slightly, enough to sound human. Ellie's hands stayed in her lap, but her shoulders didn't rise to her ears the way they used to. I didn't want to make you mad, she said. Mike's eyes filled. It wasn't your job to manage my feelings. That sentence, simple, obvious, devastating, was one of the first truly healthy things I'd ever heard him say. Ellie swallowed. I don't feel scared right now. Mike nodded, slow. Good. That's what I want. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in a bow. It wasn't a family magically repaired. It was something rarer. A real beginning. And I learned something I wish I could teach in medical school, right between anatomy and pharmacology. Love doesn't require fear. Fear is not discipline. Fear is not high standards. Fear is not character building. And when a child gets quieter, it isn't always maturity. Sometimes it's a smoke alarm with the volume turned down, because someone taught them that even sounding the alarm is wrong. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, please give the video a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. And I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What stood out to you, and what would you have done in her place? See you next time.